about an outbreak of cryptosporidium. Businesses and residents in the tourist town are being asked to boil water used for drinking and food preparation after 15 cases of gastro sickness were reported. The Queenstown Lakes District Council announced the boil water notice about 7:30 last night on Facebook. But some restaurants say they didn't get an official email until after 9 o'clock this morning. One owner says they feed hundreds of people each day and should have had more notice. The council says it still hasn't identified the source of the outbreak. A media commentator says tonight's debate will put National leader Christopher Luxon's deflection technique to the test. The leaders of both major parties are about to square off in the TVNZ showdown starting at 7 o'clock. Bill Ralston says Mr Luxon's deflection of questions, such as the real amount of revenue that could be raised through a foreign buyer's tax, will be put to the test.
You know, if he does that in the debate, it will be immensely frustrating. That will draw Hipkins into quite spirited attacks on him. That's where the debate tonight will be crucial. If Hipkins can drag him into a knockdown, drag-out slanging match, Hipkins will win.
Bill Ralston says if Christopher Luxon can stick to his policy lines and not engage in any personal attacks, he may come out on top. The Green Party is calling its policy to extend the free lunch in schools program a no-brainer. It wants to give meals to 135,000 more kids from the start of next year, a more than 50% increase on the current program. It would cost more than $1.1 billion over the next 3 years, which would be paid for from the party's proposed wealth tax. The Greens co-leader, Marama Davidson, says New Zealand is behind many countries that already have universally supplied school lunches.
That's important to not allow for the stigma between some children need lunches and some children don't. Just make it that we are feeding all of our kids in schools. For us, that's the value that we're upholding.
Marama Davidson says free lunches in schools will lower families' stressors and benefit their mental health. A Christchurch school principal hopes dozens of donated air purifiers will make a big difference to families grappling with the smell in the suburb of Bromley. Residents have complained to the City Council about the smell linked to both the City Council's compost processing and wastewater treatment plants, which they believe is affecting their health. The Asthma and Respiratory Foundation have donated 40 air purifiers to Bromley School for families of pupils who have asthma. Principal Scott Kinley says it's a fantastic gesture. He says about 10% of the Bromley School's pupils have asthma. In sport, the Warriors coach Andrew Webster is encouraging his players to ride the wave of success this week. The team reviewed their 40-10 win over the Newcastle Knights today as part of the preparation for Saturday's NRL preliminary final against the Broncos. Webster believes as they begin week 3 of the finals, he knows how to approach the build-up.
We learned so much from week 1, but we need to be more relaxed in our preparation, not as ferocious in our mentality, confident in ourselves, realising what we do so well.
The Warriors leave for Brisbane on Thursday. Black Caps leg spinner Ish Sodhi says the one-day series against Bangladesh will be ideal preparation for next month's World Cup in India. The first of 3 ODIs is in Dhaka on Thursday. The New Zealanders had their first training today and Sodhi says any competition is good.
You know, that match intensity, as many games as you can play. I think, putting yourself in those high-pressure situations is always crucial leading into a big tournament. And so really looking forward to that. Obviously, it's pretty hot in India and obviously really cold here. I'm just getting used to those conditions at the moment.
The side will be led by Lockie Ferguson following Tim Southee's injury in England. And the All Blacks coach Ian Foster says he's surprised that prop Ethan de Groot copped a ban for his dangerous tackle against Namibia, but says the team won't appeal the decision. De Groot has been suspended for 2 games following his red card in last week's win in Toulouse, and he'll miss the All Blacks' final Rugby World Cup pool matches against Italy and Uruguay. That's the news.
Opponents question the major party's finances.
If you're out at sea and the wind turns bad and the tide turns bad, you're going to have to reset your compass, so to speak, to get out of it. And I'm not hearing that.
While Chris Hipkins says costly policies have been scaled back.
Well, we're not going to announce policies that we're not announcing because we've decided not to do them.
And Ryan Hamilton toes the party line.
Do you agree with Christopher Luxon that fluoridation is incredibly safe?
I'm 100% behind our leader.
Covering all sides of the election. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
You are with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty, mainly fine. Areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog tomorrow. From Waipomo to Wellington, including the central high country, cloud increasing today. Mostly cloudy tomorrow, with a few morning showers about Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, but some afternoon fine breaks. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine apart from some cloud and the odd shower about the Tararua district. Isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon and evening. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine weather. A few showers tomorrow morning in Marlborough and North Canterbury. Northwest gales about the Canterbury high country tomorrow. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain becoming heavy and persistent from tomorrow afternoon with possible thunderstorms in southern Westland and Fiordland. For Otago and Southland, mainly fine, scattered light rain overnight, northwest gales tomorrow, and for Kohu, Chatham Islands, fine weather. The time is just gone 7 minutes past 5. I will have traffic news and headlines for you at about 20 past 5.
Ngā mihi, Evie. And today a 16-year-old appeared in youth court charged with murder. More on that shortly. But we begin tonight in Queenstown. The number of confirmed cases of a parasitic gastro outbreak in Queenstown has almost doubled to 15. A boil water notice is still in place for anyone connected to the public supply, including tourist accommodation. The council says it is continuing to test water supplies, but there is currently no confirmed link. But it's taking a cautious approach. A Queenstown restaurant owner says they didn't officially find out about a parasitic outbreak of Cryptosporidium for more than 12 hours after the boil notice was issued. Tess Brunton has more.
The Queenstown Lakes District Council announced a boil water notice just before 7:30 last night on Facebook. But one local restaurant owner, who asked to remain anonymous, says they didn't get an official heads up until after 9 o'clock this morning via email, and they're appalled it took so long. Their comments have been revoiced.
From a business perspective, we're feeding hundreds of people daily, as is every other restaurant in town. We should have got an email last night before anyone had any service.
All water use for drinking, food preparation, dishwashing and for pets should be boiled for at least a minute. Operators in the town are worried what will happen if the boil water notice remains in place and the impact it will have on the town's lifeblood, tourism. Morrison's Irish pub owner Adam Nagy also didn't receive an official notice from council until this morning, and only a few people received mobile updates. He wants to know why it took so long for the council to act, and he says people have been getting sick for a while now.
Up to 5 weeks ago, definitely 11 days ago, it was already happening. The council already knew about it. Never said anything to anyone up until yesterday, and then all of a sudden it's a scramble to say, all right, and there's no ice in the bar. People who are selling coffees aren't even allowed to use their coffee machine.
He says it's been a headache.
You can't use any ice, you can't use your post-mix. So at the moment we're in a mad scramble to go out and find soft drinks so we can serve soft drinks. We can't serve water. We have to boil all our water. And it's a prerequisite that the bar needs to serve water, so we've got to get in there and boil all our waters.
Queenstown businesses say they want answers and action so they aren't left in the dark again.
Well, joining us now is the Chief Executive of Queenstown's Reese Hotel, Mark Rose. Kia ora, Mark.
Kia ora, Lisa.
So what do you make of all of this?
Well, it's pretty painful, really. With a hotel, everything we do is based around water, from showering to washing your teeth to grabbing a coffee and cooking. It's been a very difficult day for the team. We've been out buying water, so we've made the offer to our guests that if they need any water, we've got water there for them. We heard about it last night about 5 o'clock. We weren't told about the coffee machine. Our coffee supplier, Ozone, out of the Taranaki, rang us sort of at midday and said, hey guys, you can't be making coffee.
Midday today, Mark?
Midday today, yeah.
Right.
So we stopped straight away, and we've got a pretty full hotel, and people are pretty aghast that first world country, we're having these sorts of problems with our water supply.
So, yeah, what do you think of that then? Because you are supposed to be a resort town, right? So you're not really doing the first world thing, are you?
We certainly aren't, and it's it is a worry. I'm expecting overnight to get please explains from our agents overseas, and I'm sure there'll be guests. We'll be getting guest emails, or emails from guests who haven't yet arrived, asking us what the situation was and how long this is going to go on for. And unfortunately, we're as much in the dark as they are. Now, I emailed the council today and asked them about the coffee machine stuff, and when we heard from Ozone, I haven't heard back from them. I'm sure they are inundated, so I don't mean that to be a criticism, but we're really dancing in the dark.
Yeah, how do you feel the council communication has been?
Well, it seems to have been a bit late. We've had staff off probably over the last definitely 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, with all of the symptoms that they've been telling us are symptoms of the bug. So I would suggest it's been around for quite a bit longer than just the last week. We've had one of our managers was off and couldn't get out of bed for 5 days. So it is a concern in the 21st century that we don't seem to be able to get on top of these sorts of things, especially given that all the pain we've had from COVID. I think we might learn.
The council's latest update, Mark, says that they increased the frequency of testing of their water, on Friday the 8th of September, following reports of people living in Fern Hill feeling unwell. Do you think the bird should have gone up then and you should have got a warning?
Oh, absolutely. And Mika, the young man I was talking about, lives in Fern Hill. So it definitely should have gone up then. But I guess, it raises another question, doesn't it? We should have filters on our water. It comes from a lake. We should, in this day and age, be filtering all of our water.
What kind of impression do you think this is going to leave international tourists with? As you said, you're expecting, to get some contact from agents overseas. What kind of image are you projecting?
Look, it can't be good, can it? It's we're seen as a pristine, clean green. We've marketed ourselves on those terms for many years, and this goes against everything that we've used. I've just come back from Southeast Asia yesterday. I did 2 weeks up there selling, and the clean green thing is such a big deal, and I'm feeling a bit silly right now, to be honest. The agents, I saw 500 agents in 2 weeks, and here's me spouting on about how great New Zealand is, how clean it is, and then we can walk back into this.
Really appreciate your time, Mark. Best of luck. That is Mark Rose, who is the Chief Executive of Queenstown's Reese Hotel. It is 13 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. There are no words to describe how much he will be loved and missed. The family of a man killed at an Auckland bus depot has paid tribute to their son, brother, grandson, uncle, nephew and friend. The 24-year-old died in hospital after being stabbed during an altercation at the Albany bus station. Today, a 16-year-old appeared in court, charged with murder. Auckland Transport is promising more security on its buses for the foreseeable future, but its boss says growing antisocial behaviour is an all of society problem. Community leaders say the fatal attack highlights a growing problem that needs to be addressed. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi have the story.
It was a very different scene at Albany bus station this afternoon to the chaos and panic of yesterday when emergency services tried to save the man's life. They couldn't. The cordons are now lifted and the busy North Shore bus station is back up and running, but there remains a heavy police and security presence to reassure commuters traumatised by what they saw here. At 10 to 1 in the afternoon, the time the incident occurred yesterday, 2 police officers roam Platform B where it took place.
I was on the bus that was 20 minutes before it all went down, so it was pretty scary. When I came home last night, I got back to Albany at about 1 o'clock, and there was security everywhere, so at least it's good that that's there now.
I didn't expect something like that. I stay here in Albany, and when my husband told me about it, I was actually planning on going out yesterday, and it was going to be around the same time.
We usually used to come at around 12:50 here. I used to pick him from the daycare. Yesterday we were lucky we didn't came. He didn't win, so we were lucky. So we feel safe today because a lot of police around.
I noticed a few extra bus drivers. There's only 2 bus drivers sitting on the bus.
Oh, there was an extra AT guy on the bus, so not sure if that's for security or not.
It is kind of scary that Auckland's becoming like this, but what are you going to do?
Albany Ward Councillor Wayne Walker says the attack has shocked the community.
Surprised, saddened, absolute tragedy.
He says the council is working together with police and Auckland Transport to ensure security measures are tightened, but he wants to assure the public it's safe at the depot.
We've got to do things better, but it is a really good facility and people should have a lot of confidence in being able to catch a bus safely here.
This isn't the first time Mr Walker has dealt with public safety issues at a park and ride, with issues at the Silverdale Park and Ride earlier this year.
There's no question that there's been an issue with youth. There appears to be a situation where youth circulate around the region. There may be some turf wars going on. Certainly we've had instances of muggings and so on. There's been a problem there, and the consequences that Auckland Council escalated their security presence and so on.
He says more needs to be done.
Somehow we have to get to the root of these things. What's driving them? What are the societal things that are enabling these things to happen?
This university student who regularly catches the bus at Albany Station also had a frightening incident recently.
Last week, when me and two of my other friends were on the bus, there was a girl who was kind of yelling at us and calling us names and just out of nowhere, and we just tried to ignore her, and she pulled a knife out of her bag.
AT's CEO Dean Kimpton has described the increase in antisocial behaviour as troubling.
I think it's a societal issue, first and foremost. Yes, of course, we need increased policing and we need to train our people to manage those, and we'll look at security guards and systems to protect, but I have a view that some of this comes down to individual responsibility.
He says they're also seeing dangerous behaviour on the road as well as public transport.
We're seeing other jurisdictions are seeing similar increases in this sort of behaviour, and we're also seeing it on our roads. More risk-taking and more aggressive driving. So we're seeing it play out a number of fronts.
Youth worker Aaron Hendry worries for Aotearoa's young people.
Young people that are living on our streets, living in emergency accommodation, young people that don't have safety, stability and the care and support that they need. And so there's huge gaps there. And that is, I guess, a huge driving factor to seeing that sort of harmful behaviour happening in our communities.
He says tougher punitive measures aren't the only answer.
The evidence that we have around our current justice system that punitive measures don't work and they don't create community safety. If we want to create community safety, we need to have a conversation as a community about what it means to really adequately care for our young people and also create connected, safe communities.
The 16-year-old boy charged with murder is due to appear in court again next month.
And if you were listening to that story on radio, the video version will be on our webpage. And joining us now is Gary Froggatt, National President of the Tramways and Public Transport Union. Kia ora, Gary.
Kia ora, Lisa.
How are your drivers feeling? Are they nervous or scared?
Well, the drivers that we represent and bus drivers throughout New Zealand have faced being abused, punched, spat on and sworn at. They are concerned, and some incidents have been really bad. One of our drivers in Auckland here was punched a number of times, and he was off. He's been off work, or he was off work for about 12 months. And he's still suffering from the incident. Drivers are constantly raising these issues at depot meetings and health and safety meetings. They're very concerned, which causes stress and mental anxiety. We've been discussing the introduction of safety screens in the bus for a long time, but that is all that really happens. Just talk with no final resolution by either the bus companies or the regional councils.
I want to talk about possible solutions or protections for the drivers in a second, Gary, but first, do you think from what you are hearing that the frequency of these incidents is rising?
Well, I'm in two minds. Given the large number of passenger trips that the buses do each day and the incidents that do occur, I don't think it's increasing, but the the results are getting worse. The companies have, we've been discussing with the companies de-escalation training programs, and they've been arranged by Auckland Transport and NZ Bus, but only very few employees have been through the courses, and that's a real concern.
So potentially more threatening and more violent, but not more frequent, you think, Gary?
That's my impression, but I don't have the exact figures.
Right. So what is it about a situation, queuing at the bus stop or getting on the bus? Why is there so much aggro around this situation? What do you think's driving it?
Oh, well, in the Auckland City central area, it's really what's been reported to me is the homeless people riding the buses for nothing, and probably for something to do, and then when they're challenged by the drivers, which they're not really encouraged to do, as they've been instructed not to argue with passengers under any circumstances, as that does lead to the confrontation, they're taking it out on the driver.
So when you talk about these potential protective booths or screens for drivers,
yes.
Can they have panic buttons? Are you asking for these booths to be installed immediately? Where are you at?
Well, as I say, we've been discussing them for some years, and I've got correspondence going back some 10 years. But we seem to just talk about it, and there's really no final resolution by either the bus companies or the regional councils.
Really appreciate your time, Gary. That's Gary Froggatt, who's the National President of the Tramways and Public Transport Union there. 22 minutes after 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, do send us your feedback about anything you've heard on the program this evening. If you're in Queenstown, are you in that boil water area? And let us know what kind of impact it's having on you, your household or your business. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie's here with the headlines. Ko Evie anō tēnei.
Police say the victim of a fatal stabbing at a bus station in Auckland yesterday was a 24-year-old man. A 16-year-old appeared in the Hamilton Youth Court today, charged with murder. The rules over reporting youth court proceedings mean further details about the case, including the victim's name, can't be reported. The number of confirmed cases of a parasitic gastro outbreak in Queenstown has almost doubled to 15. Residents and businesses on the town's water supply are asked to boil water for food preparation or for brushing teeth. And Te Whatu Order is asking people who've been in Queenstown in the last 12 days and are experiencing a gastric upset to inform their GP. Christopher Luxon says being the leader of the opposition is the longest job interview he's ever had as he prepares for the first televised leaders' debate. The leaders of the two major parties will face off tonight in the One News leaders' debate. Chris Hipkins says he was spending much of the afternoon reading up on notes. Lawyers for the Crown say it's not for New Zealand authorities to decide what's relevant to the FBI prosecution of Kim.com. The controversial founder of the data-sharing website Mega Upload is appealing against a High Court decision that would see his hard drives and passwords released to the US. His lawyer says the devices also hold private photos and videos, but the Crown lawyer says New Zealand authorities can't cherry-pick evidence for the FBI. And close to half a tonne of beef and pig meat has been dumped in public rubbish bins around Christchurch over the past month in the suburbs of Wigram and Hornby. A councillor, Andre Moore, says the meat sitting in the sun is a potential biohazard. Those are the headlines. In Auckland on the Southern Motorway, this is traffic now, just letting you know. In Auckland on the Southern Motorway, there's a breakdown blocking the middle southbound lane after the Simon Street overbridge just outside of the city, and a crash has been cleared from Upper Harbour Highway just before 5 from the left westbound lane before Trigg Road, but there might still be delays there. Look, going down to the Wellington region, a strong winds warning is now in place over Rimutaka Hill. Meanwhile, the warning for State Highway 8, Twizel to Tekapo, has been lifted. good. Our next traffic news and headlines is at about 20 to 6.
Kia ora, Iho. The Warriors are calling on Queensland-based Kiwis to come out in big numbers and fill the stands for the NRL preliminary final against the Brisbane Broncos. Tickets for Saturday's game at the 52,000-seat Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane went on sale today, and some parts of the stadium are already sold out. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Oh, they're stacking the audience. How much of a difference do they think a few, New Zealand and Warriors fans are going to make?
Suncorp Stadium is known to be a bit of a cauldron and quite an intimidating place for opposition teams to go. So they're hoping that some of those New Zealanders based over there actually manage to snap up some of those tickets and get into the stadium. The Warriors don't actually have a winning record at Suncorp Stadium. Of the 20 games that they've played there, they've actually only won 6. So any support that they can get, because they know coming off a home final here just at the weekend, they had a sellout crowd here, and they know how much it buoys the team during a time when, in a game like that, you can getting a bit tired and you're kind of relying on the crowd to lift you a little bit during that. So somebody who has actually been on the other side of that as recently as last season is former Bronco turned Warrior, back to Mauri Martin. He knows what to expect at Suncorp.
Being the home team, it's definitely a really nice crowd to have on your side. Saying that, this week there's a lot of Kiwis over there, I know Gold Coast, Brizzy, so hopefully we can sort of mix it 50-50 would be nice. But yeah, I've got some good mates still in Brizzy. I've got one of the boys' weddings to go to in October, end of October, so it'll be good to have the sort of bragging rights there.
And for that crowd as well, he wasn't the only player to kind of point out that when you walk around on the Gold Coast, it can feel a bit like New Zealand with all of the New Zealanders over there. So a bit like the other teams, New Zealand-based teams that are in the Australian competition, like the Wellington Phoenix or the New Zealand Breakers, who do pick up some good support away from New Zealand. They're hoping to cash in on that as well and dial it up a little bit because this is quite an important game.
Quite an important game. OK, the All Blacks prop Ethan de Groot has been banned for New Zealand's last 2 Rugby World Cup pool matches. That's got Ian Foster grumbling too, doesn't it?
It does. So de Groot and the All Blacks failed to convince the judiciary that the red card, that his foul play wasn't a red card action. So the independent panel actually found that de Groot's failure to wrap his arms around the Namibian opponent meant that the tackle was illegal, and with head contact he could have actually been facing a 6-match ban. So that ban has been halved based on his good behaviour and will be reduced again by 1 game. So that's if he does the World Rugby Coaching Intervention Program. However, Coach Ian Foster is frustrated with this outcome.
There's lots of layers in the judiciary now between referees and TMOs, and then we've got a bunker, and even those 3 weren't totally aligned on it. I'm not sure ours was a significant shoulder-to-head contact.
Despite this frustration, they aren't actually going to appeal it. They did have 48 hours to do so. So de Groot will miss the Italy and Uruguay games, but he will be available for the quarterfinals if the All Blacks make it that far in the tournament.
Thank you, Felicity. Sports reporter Felicity Reid there. The traditional summer holiday roadie is about to get a lot pricier. The AA is predicting 91 octane could hit $3.50 a litre by Christmas. Whoa, Merry Christmas. Right now in Auckland, it's hovering around the $3 mark. Obviously, this all depends on exactly where you are. In Wellington, it's about $3.10 a litre. And in Whangarei, one of the most expensive petrol spots in the country, it's cracking $3.15. Well, joining us now is AA's Principal Motoring Affairs Policy Advisor, Terry Collins. Hi, Terry. Thanks for the bad Christmas news.
Yeah, I don't feel like being Grinch, but it's just, I've seen a few things happening, and it's just a bit of a heads up for people. Kind of since June, the middle of June, the price of crude oil's gone up a third, 32%. No, but what's even more worrying, in the last 3 weeks, it's gone up 14.5%. So what happens is you buy futures. So that price that we saw today of $95 a barrel, that's for the contracts in October. That crude will then be refined and shipped to us. So we're yet to see those price increases come through our market. That's why I'm predicting it's going to go up a little bit more.
Right, so it'll come down the pipe a little bit later, and that's international factors. What about local factors? Is that having any impact on the price?
Well, we shut down the refinery, and what happened was we started, instead of buying in cheaper crude, we bought a more expensive refined product.
So this is Marsden you're talking about, yeah, Terry?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So then we started bringing in more expensive product. Well, we had lower dairy price payouts, so it's kind of impacted on our balance of trade, our deficit, and that's kind of impacted on our dollar. So our dollar's gone down a bit, strengthening US dollar. So that's added a little bit extra to it as well. So there's a whole bunch of other factors. But basically, Saudi Arabia and Russia now are really just controlling the market. And the cuts they're put on, which initially for a month, are now going to go through for a year. And funnily enough, Russia has got a shortage of diesel in its own country, so it could even be taking further market off. It just, the demand for petrol, diesel, etc., in the face of a slow economic activity has been really resilient. The scary part will happen between now and Christmas if the economy takes off and overseas and other places, is what's going to happen to the demand and to the price.
So that's cars. What about aviation fuel? Because people do love to take a flyaway holiday sometimes over the summer.
Yeah. And there's a problem there too. There's a global refinery lack of capacity. There's been maintenance programs going on. And we've actually been sending signals for a long time saying, hey, don't invest in this really expensive piece of kit because we want to go to renewables. So there's a shortage of these things. And that middle distillate for diesel is the same middle distillate that they use for aviation kerosene. So if there's a shortage of diesel globally, which is starting to come on, there's definitely going to be higher prices for aviation fuel because that's what's called a middle distillate as well.
So, Terry, I don't want to double down on the grinchiness, but I do need to ask. So $3.50 is your prediction. You're not anticipating it could go higher than that, are you?
Well, no. What I'm saying is not $3.50, but I think it's going to be closer to $3.50 than it's going to be closer to $3. Now, will it get to $3.50? Probably not, but it's going to be a lot closer than it is to $3, that's for sure.
I know you're the master on making petrol savings. So as people are coming into holiday season, they'll be thinking about, what it's going to cost them and whether they should be taking trips. What is the best way to use fuel discounts? Because I know you're pretty tricky with this. So explain it to us.
It is. If you can, a simple example, sometimes you can cash in the 10 cents or 6 cents at the time you fill up the pump, or you can accumulate. A quick example of it, if it's a 10 cent Wednesday and I cash it in on $40 worth of gas at $3 a litre, that's about 13.3 litres, so I save $1.33. If I do that 10 times, I save myself $13. If I save my 10 cents over those same 10 fills and I'm allowed to fill up for 50 litres, I save $50. So it's just how you use it. It's better sometimes to accumulate and get the bigger fill than to use it at the time. But also the Commerce Commission is very clear that often discount schemes aren't the best value. Sometimes it's looking at those apps like Gatsby and working out what's cheaper. There's still big variations. There's like anywhere between 40 cents in the regions now, just on different prices and where you are.
So people need to keep their eyes open. Thank you, Terry. Really appreciate that. Terry Collins is the AA's Principal Motoring Affairs Policy Advisor. I could see the mental calculator in Evie's head working then when he was explaining how we need to use those. Nona's all across this petrol story, and she joins us in the studio because it is, of course, time for the business news. So ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. We're going to talk about some other things. So Nona, Takeovers panel wants to promote competition in active takeover offers. Whoa, break that down for me.
Well, I will. I think it's quite important. It does sound kind of technical, but really there are two kinds of takeovers. These are for public companies primarily, right? So there's the old takeover method where you basically make a bid, and some people would call those people corporate raiders, that kind of stuff. Sometimes those takeover offers are hostile and they're not very tidy. Then there's these other types, which have become a lot more common in recent years, and they're called scheme of arrangements. So it's basically where one party, talks to the board of another party and says, hey, we'd like to maybe buy you. These are the price that we are interested in offering. What do you think? The other one says, well, maybe we want this or that. Negotiated, and then they put it to their shareholders to agree, and then finally it's presented to the High Court, and then the deal is done. So we've seen a lot of those recently. But the Takeovers panel is concerned that they're not very competitive, these types of scheme of arrangements, so that there's lockup deals. So, for example, one company is offering to buy another, and then they say, okay, well, while we're working through our offer, nobody else can look at your books and no one else can make an offer, that kind of thing, which introduces an exclusivity, but it also disadvantages shareholders potentially, because that means that they're not going to be seeing any competing bids for the same share, for example, right? So the idea here is the takeover panels is not committed to changing the rules to make them regulations. They're thinking maybe that guidelines might work better, but what they really want is to hear from the industry. Because it is a kind of like every time you put in a regulation, there's often unintended consequences. And the purpose of this is to encourage competition, not to lessen it. So they want to hear from people. They're asking them to get in contact before or on the 1st of December. So there you go.
Okay, let's talk about house prices under pressure again. Now, do you mean upward or downward, Nona, and why?
You'll be happy to hear it's upward pressure for a change. Yeah. So we've been talking about the downward pressure in the market.
Shoppers will not be happy to hear that, but continue on.
Well, you might be happy. I mean, some homeowners are going to be happy. Others won't. But even buyers might be happy because now this is the reason it's kind of perverse, but anyways, it turns out that there's fewer properties on the market. So if you're a buyer, there's very little selection. And it's not to say that the prices are going to go skyrocketing. It's simply that there were very few listings on the market. This is making it difficult for buyers to get a hold of anything, and they're starting to buy whatever is available. Sellers are sitting on the fence, and that's one of the reasons why the pressure is on the upside. So this is a good opportunity. It's almost that turning point where sellers might come back into the market. There'll be a lot more selection, and then there'll be a more balanced market. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's quite a good thing if the market starts to loosen up on both sides without going crazy on pricing.
And what numbers have you got from the markets, please?
Well, I don't have any crazy prices there either. Let's see. The index, it fell nearly 0.5% today. That's a 42-point drop to 11,344. That's what we're seeing in Asia. And, of course, there's a lot of nervousness ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve, who's going to, talk about interest rates later this week. The dollar, 59.2 U.S. cents, 91.99 Australian. So not quite 92. And 47.8 British pence.
With the very fine detail. Thank you so much, Nona. That is Nona Peltier with Business News. Returning to our earlier story about a parasitic gastro outbreak in Queenstown that's prompted a boil water notice. There are now 15 confirmed cases of cryptosporidium, and anyone on the town's water supply must boil their water. Now, the bug causes diarrhoea and stomach cramps and can be easily spread. Local hotel operator believes the high-end tourist town is looking anything but high-end right now. The water is not confirmed to be the source, but the council says it is taking a cautious approach. Well, joining us now is the Queenstown Lakes Mayor, Glenn Lewis. Kia ora, Glenn.
Kia ora. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, but it doesn't sound like it's great down there. Has the council made a hash of spreading the word about this problem?
No, I don't. Wouldn't agree with that one. We've obviously put a notice out. It's a proactive, precautionary approach.
You put a notice on social media, right? And there were still hotels, accommodation providers and food providers who said they were serving people last night oblivious to a boil water notice.
We can't always get everyone, but obviously we put it out to all media outlets that we know of. We put it onto our social media, and obviously I'm speaking to you now, and I know the officers were talking with media all through yesterday evening and early this morning.
Okay, so you think you did the best job possible, do you, in terms of informing your local tourist operators?
Yes.
Right, because they think differently.
Well, that's just a point of disagreement then.
Okay, so in your latest update, you say that the council increased the frequency of its testing on Friday, the 8th of September, following reports of people living in Fern Hill feeling unwell. Why didn't you tell the public about it then?
Because we did not have any reports of cryptosporidium, and all of the testing that we were doing was coming back negative.
But you did have reports, didn't you, of people with gastro symptoms, quite severe gastro symptoms?
That was through social media posts, but again, we had no confirmed cases of cryptosporidium at that time, and Te Wharaora Southern or New Zealand Health had not told us of any cases at that point of time.
Understand that, but here's the facts, right? You were so concerned about the social media reports about people feeling unwell with severe gastro symptoms that you increased the testing of your water supply. Why were you not so concerned that you didn't put out some kind of public notice?
We increased the testing. The testing came back negative. So from our point of view, there was no need to raise the awareness or raise the need to, let's say, go to a boil water notice then.
I assume you're aware that cryptosporidium is very hard to detect in testing regimes. So you may have to test multiple times in large quantities. Yet you took those test results as being definitive, even though you're a resort town with lots of visitors, high turnover and reliance on water?
No, they are an indicator of, let's say, something untoward in the water, and they were coming back negative. And as you correctly say, testing for cryptosporidium is an unreliable test and can take, I think I've been informed, takes 3 days. So we do the best we can with the tools available to us.
How do you think Queenstown is looking at the moment when it markets itself as a high-end resort town and you got a boil water notice?
Yes, we're acutely aware of that. We're on to day 2, so once we get more information and as it comes to hand, we'll make the decisions as quickly as we possibly can.
So what image do you think the town is projecting right now?
One that is taking public health seriously.
Could the council have handled this better?
We only found out on Monday morning. I think I got my phone call between 8 and 9, if I remember rightly. So I think we handled it as quickly as we possibly could with the information we had available to us.
So 8 or 9 in the morning? 8 or 9 in the morning, you mean you were told?
Yes.
Well, that's hours before you told people.
Because we had to go through proper process. We formed our press release mid-morning through to lunch. We had to run that through Te Wharaora and the regulator, Taumata Arawai, and once they'd signed that off and got the health professionals and the medical professionals, health officials' review of it, that's when it went out.
Okay, so the exact time you posted it, please?
Oh, that would probably be around 5:36, I think.
Right, so how many more people do you reckon got sick in that time that it took you to tell people what was going on?
Well, I'm not going to speculate because cryptosporidium takes 7 to 14 days to incubate and then actually come out. So the people that have the cases now is from roughly early September.
Appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much for your time. That is the Queenstown Lakes Mayor, Glyn Lewis there. It is 17 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. If you're living in the Queenstown area, do you feel your council has handled this gastro outbreak well enough? Let us know your thoughts and your reasons why. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines. Anea Iwi, mena pitspita kōrero.
Bus drivers are concerned for their safety after a man was fatally stabbed at a bus station in Auckland. Today, a 16-year-old appeared in court charged with murder. The national president of the Tramways and Public Transport Union, Gary Froggatt, told Checkpoint that the level of violence against drivers is getting worse. He says safety measures have been discussed between bus companies and regional councils for years, but nothing has been achieved. A Queenstown restaurant owner says they didn't officially find out about a boil water notice that has been prompted by a parasitic outbreak for more than 12 hours. 15 cases of sickness stemming from cryptosporidium have now been reported. A family friend of a woman killed in 1994 by a man who went on to kill again in similar circumstances in 2018 says the coroner's inquest has made it clear that multiple mistakes were made by departments overseeing the murderer, but no one would take responsibility. A joint inquest is being held into the murder of Nicole Tuxford by Paul Tainui and the suspected suicide of Gary Schroeder, whose daughter was killed by Paul Tainui in 1994. Jenny Cogan, a friend of the Schroeder family, says she hopes real change comes out of the inquest. And one of Britain's most celebrated folk singers and songwriters, Roger Whittaker, has died, aged 87. His family says he died last week in southern France. Roger Whittaker sold nearly 50 million records over his career. His biggest hits were Durham Town, The Last Farewell and New World. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic. On Auckland's southern motorway, that breakdown has quickly been moved. That was blocking the middle southbound lane after the Simon Street overbridge heading out of the city south, so hopefully there are a few delays there. And on State Highway 2, Demutaka Hill has a strong winds warning in place. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Evie. A coroner's inquest has heard that double murderer Paul Tainui is now used as a case study for certain types of psychopathy for corrections staff training. Tainui raped and murdered Nicole Tuxford in Christchurch after breaking into her home and lying in wait for her in 2018. He murdered his ex-partner Kimberly Schroeder on the West Coast in 1994 in similar circumstances. A joint inquest has been held into the murder of Nicole Tuxford and the suspected suicide of Kimberly Schroeder's father, Gary, who died after hearing Tainui had killed again. Rachel Graham has been at the inquest.
Paul Tainui did not meet the level where he was diagnosed as a psychopath during an assessment in 2010. But the Chief Advisor for Corrections, Nick Wilson, told the inquest that view would be different now. He says there is now a better understanding of subtypes of secondary psychopathy, such as people who present as anxious and self-critical rather than overly confident. And Tainui is among a number of cases now used to train corrections staff. Mr Wilson says they now look for things like hostility and seeking retribution for perceived hurts.
Hostility can be carried within the person over some time and settings and not be obvious until the particular circumstances that trigger that hostility, that pathological response to being rejected, and then the desire to seek revenge for what is basically an ego wound, will drive someone to retribution acts.
The inquest also heard from a woman who acted as supervisor in the workplace where Tainui met Nicole Tuxford. The woman, who has name suppression, said she'd been told of Tainui's offending, but only learnt later of his pre-planning and earlier offending. She would be contacted occasionally by corrections about how Tainui was doing, but never thought there were any concerns to pass on, only learning he and Nicole Tuxford were socialising after her death. Her comments have been revoiced.
I thought I got to know Paul well, and that he'd confided in me, including about playing golf, his niece, his mother, his upbringing, and his friendship with David Bain. He talked about these issues a lot. I thought I knew what he was up to outside of work pretty well.
Jenny Cogan, a friend of the Schroeder family, says the inquest process has been arduous and long for the family members. She says now they just hope that some real change comes out of the process.
It actually just comes back to the simple basics. You know, one of the biggest flaws through all of what has happened was communication amongst departments, and rather than there being this aggressiveness from one department towards another, shouldn't they all actually be sharing information and working more closely together?
The inquest was started in November last year, and after 2 weeks was delayed for 11 months before resuming on Monday. Victims advocate Ruth Money says the delays made a difficult time even worse for families.
There's a terrible combination of court delays, lack of coroners, defence games in terms of information from corrections and other parties, and it's all culminated in just an absolutely hideous wait for inquest.
The coroner, Marcus Elliott, ended by apologising for the time it had taken and thanked the family, saying he assured them he had not forgotten that they were all there for Kimberly, Gary and Nicole.
It's 11 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A mystery meat dumper is plaguing Christchurch, offloading hundreds of kilos of raw offcuts and carcasses in public bins. The dodgy dumper struck again last night, discarding 14 bags of meat waste weighing about 250 kilos. It is the biggest incident yet, and it seems that the west of the city is the target area. Christchurch City Council says illegal roadside dumping costs ratepayers more than $800,000 in the past 6 years. Well, joining us now is Hornby councillor Mark Peters. Hi, Mark. Can you just kind of give us a bit of a description about what's being left behind in these bins?
Yeah, kia ora, Lisa. It's a bit shocking to see all these meat offcuts and carcasses being dumped in the street side bins. It's far less than ideal, and I can only imagine what it will perhaps get like into summer if we can't knock it on the head.
So what is it? Is it like, you know, what kind of meat is it and what volume of stuff are you getting?
Well, I've just asked staff actually as to try and qualify exactly what type of meat it is, but it's some of the photos I've seen, it looks like offcuts of all sorts of carcasses and meat that's being dumped, and it's really unacceptable practice that we need to try and get ceased, because it's a cost on the ratepayer for this to be dumped and not at all acceptable.
I imagine it could be a health issue at some point too.
Yeah, I can well imagine. You can only imagine if you get 30-degree days down here in Canterbury and you get some of this dumped in the bins and it starts rotting and fermenting, it could be quite a health hazard.
What do you reckon's going on here?
I suspect someone's trying to find a cheap way to dump some offcuts from something they're doing, whether it's a bit of home kill or whether it's an operation that of a restaurant or something. I don't know, but it's certainly not a good practice to encourage and allow happening. So we're really keen to have a chat to whoever's involved and just see if we can find a way around this and get it to stop so that we can get it under control.
Given the frequency and the volume of the material, is it your feeling that it's probably some kind of commercial operation?
Maybe not straight out commercial, but maybe it's a semi-commercial operation. And to me, the volume of 250 kilos in one night is extreme. And that says it's a significant operation that's being undertaken, and really needs to go into the official channels rather than being put into street side bins and expected to be taken away on the cost of the ratepayer.
Is it illegal to dump it in public rubbish bins, that volume of stuff?
I certainly believe it's not an accepted in good practice. It's something that we need to just get ceased, because, as I say, it costs the ratepayers money, so it's effectively illegal. I'm sure we can find some prosecution if we need to, but we don't really want to get to that. We want to try and have a chat and see where we can take this to get it sorted.
Yeah, well, given like the weight overnight, what was it, 200 plus kilos, that sort of, you wonder if it's more than one person having to lump it to the rubbish bins at different sites and all the rest of it. Have you got CCTV footage? I mean, how can people help you? What are you asking the public to do?
Yeah, well, that's certainly something that, we're asking anyone in the public who want to have CCT in those locations to, please, let us have a look at that footage and see if we can't identify who's doing this and have a chat and try and sort it out so that we can move forward and everyone can be happy. But 250 kilos that's a lot of meat you've obviously processed, and we need to find a way to get that into the system in an effective and legal manner.
Appreciate your time, Mark. That is Mark Peters, who's a Hornby councillor there, looking for clues. Who is this mystery meat dumper who's really offloading huge amounts of offcuts and carcasses around the city in public rubbish bins? The Electoral Commission's hoping young people will be out in force to vote in this year's general election, building on the jump in youth turnout in 2020. Just over 60% of eligible 18 to 24-year-olds voted in 2020, up from 50% in 2017. The Commission is visiting community groups, schools and universities and employing youth advisors in an effort to reach younger voters. So which election issues are important for this generation? Luca Foreman went back to campus to find out.
There are plenty of students with no idea if they'll vote or who they'll vote for.
None.
Not at all?
No.
Once I get the time, I'll read up about it and stuff, but as a student, it's hard to find the time.
No, I'm still quite indecisive.
but I also found some who put a lot of thought into it.
I'm waiting for all the policies to come out and have a good read through them before I make a decision.
I would like to go for the Green Party as well as Labour because their policies align with mine.
I think you need somebody who's money focused at the moment. Especially a lot of people are suffering with money and, it's inflation at the moment. For me, I think at the moment this would be natural, yeah.
As with people of all ages across the country, the cost of living is a priority for many students.
It's skyrocketing, yes. I've seen the mega rich and I've seen the people on the street. The thing we need to focus on is getting everyone to a sort of equilibrium.
Because people are all suffering. All over the world, everyone is suffering.
This student says it's even got many of his peers looking overseas.
Everyone in university, what they're planning to do, I've talked to many of them. Everyone's just wanting to move over to Australia.
Yeah.
They also want their government to take meaningful action on climate change.
The last time I read, Labour hadn't really released many regarding climate and environment, and it's come on, that's important too.
But for some, the climate crisis takes a back seat to the cost of living.
Climate change is on the sort of back burner for me specifically.
The climate change scenario isn't really what the people are looking towards at the moment because it's not their initial thought.
Chief Electoral Officer Carl Lacane says while he can't predict what youth turnout will be in 2023, he's encouraging everyone to enrol and vote so they can have their say.
The two Chris's vying to be the next Prime Minister will go head-to-head in their first leaders' debate tonight. Both politicians are playing down their preparation and prospects ahead of the TVNZ showdown. Our political reporter Annika Smith has more.
Leaders' debates are calendar events in any election campaign, delivering new policy.
So is that your target then? Are you committing to one tonight of bringing 100,000 kids out of poverty? Because you can actually make that a target. You've got a target for everything else.
Yes, I am committing to that.
Famous one-liners.
Well, don't tell me where the 14 billion's coming from. Repeating it. Just tell me where the money's coming. Show me the money.
And all-out fisticuffs.
Whether it's child poverty, whether it was, what was it?
Politics, of course, is a place where you'll have a lot of back and forth. But I would never stand here and blatantly call someone a liar.
Tonight, the two Chris's face off for the first time outside Parliament's debating chamber. Both leaders say they're looking forward to it.
This whole process of being leader of the opposition is probably the longest job interview I've ever gone through.
I'm hoping that people will focus on the substance of the debate rather than the sport of it.
And still scrapping over the underdog title.
Christopher Luxon's been doing plenty of practice. We're both new at this.
Oh, he's a great debater. I mean, he's actually better than Chris Bishop.
That's no surprise to media commentator Bill Ralston.
Both sides would claim to be the underdog because otherwise you're over-promising, and it's far better to look like you've come right rather than scrape through.
Mr Ralston says neither leader can lay claim to being a real underdog, and the public should be under no illusions about how seriously these debates are taken.
You know, they've been practising, both sides, despite what they say, they've been practising for weeks for this debate. They'll do mock debates. They will have someone standing in for their opponents. They'll be running through all their best lines. This afternoon they'll be doing the final polish on some of the supposed killer lines that they want to be using.
He says those killer lines may be especially handy for Chris Hipkins if Chris Luxon avoids answering questions tonight.
He uses a technique called deflection, which is not answering the question or answering another entirely different question that he's made up himself. If he does that in the debate, it will be immensely frustrating. That will draw Hipkins into quite spirited attacks on him. That's where the debate tonight will be crucial. If Hipkins can drag him into a knockdown, drag-out slinging match, Hipkins will win.
Chris Hipkins may be the more experienced politician, but Labour is up against it in the polls that have for weeks now predicted the right bloc is sitting on a healthy lead this election race. Both leaders will be throwing everything they've got at tonight's debate, the first big hurdle in the long run-up to election day.
Alrighty, some of your feedback before the news at 6. A lot of you getting in touch about the Queenstown boil water notice. This person says, I have received the official notice from the council via text at 6:40 yesterday. Another person says the council did not proactively act regarding the boil water notice. And why is the council recommending boiling water in Queenstown, says this person. Isn't public health supposed to be doing that, not the council? And Frank from Auckland says that Queenstown has a full database database of all hotels and hospo outlets, as any tourism town has. The Mayor is giving you weasel words. Another listener says the council seems to have acted as soon as they had notifications. People need to get to the doctor and be tested.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Paul Mardier, good evening. I'm Evie Ashton. A public transport union says attacks to bus drivers are getting more threatening and violent. Bus drivers are concerned for their safety after a man was stabbed at a bus station in Auckland yesterday. The 24-year-old died in hospital and a 16-year-old appeared in court today, charged with murder. The national president of the Tramways and Public Transport Union, Gary Froggatt, told Checkpoint that attacks against its members are less frequent but more aggressive.
The drivers that we represent and bus drivers throughout New Zealand have faced being abused, punched, spat on and sworn at. They are concerned and some incidents have been really bad.
Gary Froggatt says bus drivers are constantly dealing with violence and abuse, taking a toll on their mental health. A Queenstown restaurant owner suspects a gastro outbreak in the resort town could have been happening weeks longer than officials are admitting. The number of confirmed cases of cryptosporidium has doubled in 24 hours to 15. A boil water notice was issued yesterday. However, there's been no confirmed link with the public water supply. Mark Rose from the Rees Hotel told Checkpoint the council seems to have acted fairly slowly in notifying the public about the bug.
We've had staff off probably over the last definitely 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, with all of the symptoms that they've been telling us are symptoms of the bug. So I would suggest it's been around for quite a bit longer than just the last week.
Mark Rose says it's a concern that the problem has emerged in this day and age. However, the Queenstown Lakes District Mayor says the council handled the situation as quickly as they possibly could with the information they had. Christopher Luxon says being the leader of the opposition is the longest job interview he's ever had as he prepares for the first televised leaders' debate. The National Party leader will face off against the Labour leader, Chris Hipkins, in the One News leaders' debate tonight. Christopher Luxon has tried to downplay his debating skills.
In all seriousness, I've never done one before. I'm looking forward to it. I'll do my best. I'll have a lot of fun along the way and I'm looking forward to it. Look, I'm just going to go in and do my best and present my case to the New Zealand people, which is, what we don't need. What they don't need is a great debater. What they need is a great leader and a great manager.
Today, Chris Hipkins also appeared to play down expectations by saying he doesn't have a photographic memory. Lawyers for the Crown say it's not for New Zealand authorities to decide what's relevant to the FBI prosecution of Kim.com. The controversial founder of the data-sharing website Mega Upload is appealing against a High Court decision that would see his hard drives and passwords released to the US. His lawyer says that the devices also hold private photos and videos, which shouldn't be shared. But Crown lawyer David Bolt says New Zealand authorities can't cherry-pick evidence for the FBI.
For example, a lot of the content on these devices is music. Now, we don't know whether a particular music file might actually be relevant in the case of a case involving large-scale copyright breach. It could be relevant, or it could just be lawfully obtained material Mr. .com was listening to.
The judges reserved their decision. A psychiatrist says some elderly patients are spending their final years without adequate treatment, stuck in general hospital beds or heavily drugged to manage their distress. A survey by the College of Psychiatrists released today shows 94% believe current resourcing is insufficient and the mental health system isn't fit for purpose. Its spokesperson for geriatric care, Bronwyn Copeland, says some regions have no psychogeriatric beds, so patients with dementia end up in psychiatric wards.
You can imagine a frail, elderly, 80-year-old being surrounded by some patients who are much younger, much stronger, and perhaps quite agitated as part of their psychiatric illness is not the most therapeutic. So things are far from optimal, and the disparity across the country is just absolutely massive.
Dr. Copeland says elderly people deserve better. And a heat wave across Australia's southeast is intensifying, with temperatures forecast to be up to 18 degrees above average. The ABC's Chelsea Hetherington reports.
A total fire ban is in place for the Greater Sydney region as well as the far south coast of New South Wales, where nearly 30 schools are closed for the day. During a 5-day stretch starting from Saturday, Sydney is on track to record 4 days above 30 degrees, setting a new record. The heat is expected to shift north later in the week into parts of Queensland, with Brisbane predicted to reach 35 degrees on Thursday, the city's warmest September day in 6 years. A cool change is now gradually moving through South Australia and Victoria.
Koina ngā pita kōrero.
Kia ora, I'm Ngarangi Forbes, host of Mata. In the lead up to the election, I talked to Greens co-leader Marama Davidson in an extended interview about family violence, the relationship with Labour, climate change and the Kermadex. Nō reira, ariari taringa mai kia Mata after the 6:30 headlines this evening on RNZ National or at rnz.co.nz/Mata.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday for Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine. Areas of morning and evening low cloud or fog tomorrow. From Waitomo to Wellington, including the central high country, cloud increasing today, mostly cloudy tomorrow with a few morning showers about Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, but some afternoon fine breaks. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, fine apart from some cloud and the odd shower about the Tararua district. Isolated showers about the ranges tomorrow afternoon and evening. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine. A few showers tomorrow morning in Marlborough and North Canterbury. Northwest gales about the Canterbury High Country tomorrow. Bulla Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain becoming heavy and persistent from tomorrow afternoon with possible thunderstorms in southern Westland and Fiordland. Otago and Southland, mainly fine. Scattered light rain overnight. Northwest gales tomorrow. And fine weather is predicted for Chatham Islands. The time is coming up to 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi, Evie, no mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. An Auckland schoolboy who's made an amazing recovery after being hit by a car in a near-fatal accident now wants to raise awareness about road safety. 14-year-old Caden O'Neill was hit by a Range Rover while walking around the front of a commuter bus in January. His parents were told he had virtually no chance of survival because his injuries, including a severe brain trauma, were so extensive. Caden technically died twice on the way to hospital. Now, 8 months on, the teenager has fought his way back and has a new goal. I spoke with Caden and his dad, Nick, who describes the day the accident happened.
Oh, it was horrific. Like it literally is just your worst nightmare. I got a phone call from a friend who was one of his mates' dads, sort of saying, he's been in an accident, and I could hear it in his voice. It was, it was pretty serious, but he was trying not to, worry me. But I got there, and it was, just the way people were looking at us, looking at me, like there wasn't much hope, and I've never had anyone look at me that way, and it was pretty horrible.
So now that you're sitting there with your boy, who's done so well in his recovery, what do you think?
It's incredible. I mean, we got... So apart from being hit by a car, which was incredibly unlucky in an accident, we've had so much luck since. The paramedic crew were fantastic. There was a critical care paramedic who had just learned to intubate. They met us halfway to the hospital. He got on the bus. They intubated, which really kind of probably saved Cade's brain, to be honest. And just the fantastic service, like the care at Starship and then at Wilson Home, and now with the ABI recovery team just helping him learn to walk again, helping him talk, helping him learn again, like he's learning to read again and learning to write, and he's doing a really good job.
So, Caden, you accidentally stepped out from the front of a bus and was struck by a car, and now you have this amazing second chance. How do you want to use that? What do you want to do?
When I first thought about that, when I got told by my parents, what do you want to do because of this miracle of surviving? And I don't know, I guess... I don't even know what I want to do as a job. But because of the accident, I feel like I should raise awareness of like looking at the road before you cross, to listen to your parents and family about that.
So road safety, how would you like to spread the word? Would you like to speak to teenagers who are kind of your age?
Yeah, that's really the plan.
We've been asked recently to maybe go to a school and have a chat, in front of the kids. And I think Caden's getting close, his recovery is, but maybe next year we would like to do, a couple of schools and, just show a few pictures and raise awareness of what could happen and how serious it is, like wearing helmets on e-scooters, looking both ways, walking around the front of the bus, which I felt like we knew when we used to be drummed into us at school, to walk around the back of the bus so you can see what's coming. So, yeah, we'd love to do that. I think Caden has got a good story to tell. We're very fortunate because it's a happy story and a happy ending, but so many aren't.
So, Caden, I mean, some young people, they're doing risky things on the road, driving fast, stealing cars is a thing these days as well. And then also, you don't always listen to your parents when they tell you simple things like look both ways when you cross the road. So what would your message be to young people?
To listen to your family and parents about looking before you cross, because I never really thought about that. I always blew it off, and because of my survival, I feel like I should tell other children, teenagers about my story, my recovery.
And you're walking again, right? You're using crutches still, are you?
Yes, but after the most recent surgery, I can only weight bear 20%.
But that's amazing, though.
Yeah. The tibia was really badly shattered. He has a large rod in his femur, which that first operation went really, really well. But the tibia just didn't quite fuse the way that they had hoped it to. So they've just gone in and rebroken it and put a plate in and things like that, which, we're definitely on the track to recovery there. He's doing really well.
Nick, sometimes teenagers don't like to hear messages from their parents, right? So what do you think the value will be hearing it from Caden?
Yeah, I think that's really important because we're old and we're know-it-alls and we come from this angle we're wiser, we've been there, we've seen it and I think hearing it from one of their peers who clearly has been injured and has been affected and, his recovery, he's doing so well, but he's not there yet, it could be 6 months, 12 months more before he, is fully recovered. I think hearing it from someone who's been there, who was, he was a teen who was doing teenage things and out there living his life and didn't really think it would happen to him. And I think that's part of the message, right, is when you're a teenager, you don't think it's going to happen to you. You think you're above it all, but it really can happen to you.
And that was Nick O'Neill with his amazing son Caden, who is on the road to recovery. He's taught himself with the help of professionals to walk again and to speak again, and he wants to do something to help others with what he calls a second chance. And if you want to watch the video of that interview, it will be on our webpage. It is 13 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A diplomatic storm has broken out between India and Canada over the murder of a prominent Sikh activist. The Canadian Prime Minister has told Parliament there's credible evidence the Indian agents were involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia. India's responded, calling the allegations absurd. Phil Vine from World Watch reports.
Earlier in the year, a grisly but commonplace killing.
This was a shocking
and very public act of violence.
Of a man in a car park in the Canadian city of Surrey.
He was murdered in mid-June at a parking lot outside a Sikh temple in British Columbia.
Toronto journalist Nadine Youssef. At first, the Canadian Mounties didn't reveal the 45-year-old's identity, later saying it was Hardeep Singh Nijjar, president of the Sikh temple.
He is a prominent Sikh activist and leader here in Canada.
And an apparent thorn in India's side. 2 masked men fled the scene, the murder investigation ongoing. Then today, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau points the finger squarely at Delhi.
Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
From a domestic murder inquiry to a full-blown international incident. The allegation's no great surprise to Canada's Sikh community that numbers in the hundreds of thousands.
His supporters here in Canada have been quite vocal, and they've accused India of being behind his murder. And at the time, police said it was a targeted incident, but they didn't specify who could be behind his killing.
Mr. Trudeau also didn't name names, but did call it an unacceptable violation of Canadian sovereignty.
Our top priorities have been, 1, that our law enforcement and security agencies ensure the continued safety of all Canadians, and 2, that all steps be taken to hold perpetrators of this murder to account.
India has made no secret of its irritation with Sikh activists organising and staging demonstrations on Canadian soil. This is the BBC's Ambarasan Etirajan.
A section of them supporting a separate state for the Sikhs in India called Khalistan, that has been a source of irritant for India and Canada for a while.
Mr. Nijjar was wanted by Indian authorities for alleged terrorism offences and conspiracy to commit murder, which he's reportedly denied to Canadian media.
India has previously identified Mr. Nijjar as a terrorist, and he said that he has led a militant separatist group.
The Sikh separatist movement in India has a bloody past. Punjab state was rocked by a violent Khalistan movement. In the 80s and early 90s, thousands of people died. At the G20 meeting earlier this month, Mr. Trudeau says he brought up Mr. Nijjar's murder, while the Indian leader, Narendra Modi, apparently pushed back.
Prime Minister Modi accused Canada of not doing enough to address what he called anti-India activities of extreme elements on Canadian soil. And so the relationship between the two has been testy for some time.
Earlier today, Canada expelled a diplomat, reportedly the head of intelligence at the Indian embassy.
These are quite extraordinary allegations made by the Canadian Prime Minister. We don't see very often an Indian diplomat getting expelled from a Western country. So the reaction is going to be quite stronger when Delhi wakes up in a few hours' time.
Since Mr. Trudeau's remarks, Canada's Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, has used more careful language, saying that, if true, the accusations would be unacceptable. But commentators say India, fresh from hosting the most powerful leaders of the world, is unlikely to turn the other cheek.
And that was Phil Vine from World Watch. Let's get to some of your feedback now. Some of you are getting in touch already about our interview with Caden O'Neill and his dad, Nick. Caden was seriously injured after being struck by a car earlier this year, and he's made a remarkable recovery. He wants to help educate other young people about road safety. This person says, what a lad and what a dad. That is good parenting right there. Another listener's got in touch to say, I have my 22-year-old daughter at home recovering from concussion after being hit by a bus on Manners Street in Wellington in early August. She was wearing headphones and just stepped out. It will take time, but she got off lightly in reality. Kia kaha, Caden, they say. And good luck on your recovery as well. Thank you for getting in touch. On the subject of Queenstown and the boil water notice, Rob's got in touch to say, how are the Queenstown hospitality staff living in overcrowded conditions, tents and cars, going to cope with the boil water notice? Another says, do you think this is why we need 3 waters? And this one in from a listener who says, this is ridiculous. September 8th, there were posts on Facebook going around about lots of people having diarrhoea in Fern Hill. It's the 19th today. Cases doubled since yesterday. Who is going to hold the council responsible? Keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. 5 Americans jailed for years in Iran are on their way home to the United States. Tehran receiving the equivalent of $2 billion per hostage after the US released funds frozen by sanctions. The BBC's Lise Doucette reports.
The first steps to freedom. Finally leaving Iran. 2 hours later, touching down in Doha. Imagine the emotion inside this plane. Opening the door on a new life, 5 former prisoners. Relief and joy palpable as they embraced American and Qatari officials. The success of months of indirect talks here between arch enemies, Iran and America. These are 3 of the freed prisoners. 2 others didn't want their identity revealed. 67-year-old Morad Tabaz, arrested 5 years ago in a crackdown on environmental activists. 58-year-old Emad Shargi, a businessman arrested in 2020, also on charges of spying. And 51-year-old Siamak Namazi, an oil executive who spent the longest in Tehran's notorious Evin prison. He issued this statement today. For 8 years, I have been dreaming of this day, a day laced with sorrow and painful, deep guilt to leave others still behind bars in Iran.
There is no doubt that there will be...
We spoke to one of his relatives who also spent time in Evin prison.
It's a joyful day, but knowing Siam and knowing his very strong personality and his values, I'm sure that he will try to come out of this trauma as soon as possible so he can dedicate his time to constructive ideas.
Free men, arm in arm. They then took a call from America's top diplomat, who's vowed to stop this hostage-taking.
We're going to be working every single day to take steps to make this practice more and more difficult and more of a burden on those countries that engage in it.
This is such an extraordinary moment in this very ordinary setting. It marks the end of a deeply painful personal ordeal for American citizens who became bargaining chips in Iran's wrangling with the West. And they could only secure their freedom through this very political deal, which is highly complex and deeply controversial.
Iran's leaders see this as a victory too. It's why critics of this deal, including leading US Republicans, say it will only encourage Tehran to take more hostages. The Islamic Republic, suffering under crippling sanctions and unprecedented protests, sees the foreigners in this prison as one of its few levers to put pressure on the West.
In the flood-ravaged Libyan city of Derna, locals are expressing their anger and resentment at officials in charge. Videos shared earlier today appear to show the house of the mayor being burnt down. Disease is now the big concern, especially for those left homeless after 2 dams collapsed, killing thousands. The BBC's Anna Foster reports.
Anger and blame in Derna. After a week of struggle for its flood survivors, they raised their voices. This group gathered at the landmark Al-Sabaha Mosque to protest. And then, as night fell, there were videos that seemed to show the mayor's home set on fire. And Derna is paying a terrible price.
Children, women, my mother, my brother, my sister, all dead. But they are not living here, they are living in the next street. This is a bad situation. We don't know it, we don't need food, we don't need clothes. We need where we live.
We joined Turkish recovery teams in this sealed-off zone to see their work.
This is one of the streets that's been painstakingly cleared of victims, more than 500 in this area alone. But it's still such a small part of the devastation, and you can see there is still so much more to do.
These buildings were overcome with water 20 to 30 metres deep. Bodies have been found as high as 6 floors up. When the floods came, it was a split-second decision for people living here. Would they be safer to stay or escape? In a school not far away, Khalima knows she made the right choice. She brought her 5 children here before their home was swept away, and it saved their lives.
My big son asking me, "Mommy, where is my neighbor? Where is my friends? Water going, take us to death." He's every time asking me. I can't answer him. I answer him, he's going to go to their family. He say, "No, Mama is dead." I hear it.
There are no lessons in this school, no homes to go back to. For now, the lives of this city's children are on pause.
The US military is appealing for public help after mislaying a jet fighter worth tens of millions of dollars. It happened after the pilot of the F-35 ejected during what's described as a mishap over South Carolina. The sophisticated stealth jet hasn't been seen since the incident near an airbase on Sunday. The BBC's Courtney Bembridge has more.
The F-35 is one of the world's most advanced fighter jets. Each one is worth about $80 million US, and now one has disappeared. It happened on Sunday afternoon, shortly after the pilot ejected and parachuted to safety. He's now in a stable condition in hospital, and officials are trying to piece together what happened. They've described the incident as a mishap and said it happened in the southern state of South Carolina. You've got the city of Charleston here, and just to the north there are these 2 large lakes. This is Lake Moultrie and Lake Marion, and it is this area that officials say they are focusing their search based on the latest information they have on where the jet was last seen. And they've asked the public to try to help them in that search. We're also told that the jet's transponder, which would usually help people to find it or officials to find it, is not working. So lots of questions around this story, articulated probably best by Republican Nancy Mace, who asks, how in the hell do you lose an F-35? She says, how is there not a tracking device? And we're asking the public to what? Find a jet and turn it in? Well, the airbase coordinating this search, Joint Base at Charleston, has described the aircraft as being stealthy and says that it has different coatings and different designs that make it more difficult than a normal aircraft to detect. So perhaps this is a case of it being a little too stealthy.
Yeah, how do you lose a jet? Anyway, let's go to Oz now. So we know Australia has plenty of snakes. Some of those snakes can swim. Yuck. But how many of them can surf? Well, one at least. A video of a man on the Gold Coast with his board and his pet snake has caught people's attention, and the local wildlife protection officers are interested too. The BBC's Chantal Hartle has the story.
The video, set to this music, shows Igor Fioza standing on his board riding huge waves at Rainbow Bay with his 3-year-old snake Shiva wrapped around his neck. In another shot, the snake is resting on the board with Igor paddling his legs in the water. He describes Shiva as a natural and says she's been surfing at least 10 times before. Usually when she doesn't like something, she starts hissing, but she doesn't hiss in the water. She's always chill, he said. It seems that was Shiva's last ocean outing, though. After seeing the video, which featured in Australian media, Queensland wildlife officials were concerned for the python's well-being and the safety of the public. They said taking native pets out in public could cause them unnecessary stress and could make them behave in an unpredictable way. They've now fined Mr. Fioza $1,500 for breaching the conditions of owning his snake. Shiva isn't the first animal to find fame for surfing at Rainbow Bay. As well as several dogs, a duck named Duck is a regular.
Truly, it's not something we pushed. We just had him come along to the beach with us because that's what we do as a family. We would catch a wave and he'd just follow us, and realised it was fun and so wanted to do it too.
Very strange indeed. Some of you getting in touch about the mystery meat dumper in Christchurch. This person says, why not suggest they donate it to a Rana Wildlife Park in Christchurch or dog rescue shelters? It is so wasteful and illegal, says this person. And Jonathan has got in touch from Wellington. And Jonathan says, Lisa, the Christchurch meat dumper, such an awful mess. I see what you did there, Jonathan. Very clever. The Late News team is going to keep you updated throughout the night, so stay tuned. If you missed anything from the program, check us out on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get your podcast from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahia pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. First up's Nathan Rariri learns it isn't what you say in Chinese, but how you say it that makes the difference. Do tune in for that one. Brew a good coffee, 5 a.m. We'll catch you a little later in the day.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. The day after a man was fatally stabbed at a bus station in Auckland, the Bus Drivers Union says attacks against drivers are getting more threatening and violent. The Mayor of the Queenstown Lakes District has rejected criticism the council took too long to warn people about a parasitic gastro outbreak. Auckland public health officials are trying to identify anyone who could have come in contact with a person with measles who went to the emergency department at Auckland City Hospital on Sunday. And world leaders meeting at the United Nations have warned that global attempts to tackle extreme poverty and climate change are going in reverse. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow after 1 p.m. each year, the average
I'm Catherine Ryan. On 9 to noon tomorrow, claims almost 200,000 young Kiwis are at risk of unmanageable debt due to buy now, pay later services. How to harness